Hi, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm glad you could take a time out of your day to join us today on this Reef Chat. We have a couple of speakers today. Our first speaker is Mr. Dodd Holsapple, and he will tell us a little bit about how his work intersects with art and policy. And then we also have Mr. John Letts from the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Without further ado, Mr. Dodd.
Many conversations with Frida. So thank you again for inviting me to another cool program. Just to let you guys know a little bit about me, I'm a contemporary visual artist. I mix science and contemporary art. If I can further define that, I work in a very contemporary format, heavy color use, but I use scientific graphs and charts relative to environmental concerns and environmental tracking. And I weave those concepts or those graphs through my work, whether they be very linear or color-based. I kind of utilize all of that stuff, but it's information-based environmental activist artwork, basically. And the last several years have been pretty prolific, published all over the world and exhibitions around concerning this topic. I've been doing environmental art for a long time, but it just seems to be popular lately with everything that's going on, especially what the topic is today about the Reef Chat with deep sea mining. Something that's been in the background, but when I was asked to join this conversation, reading a little bit about that type of work and what that means as technology allows us to be deeper in the ocean was one big part of that. And of course, recently gold prices, which you guys have, everyone has probably seen the gold prices, which gold fever. I live in California now, so we have gold fever here. But that's basically about my work.
And that I know you have a little bit of experience in showcasing your work in public spaces and in spaces where sometimes policy is being addressed, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that works, or how your work maybe helped in changing people's perspective of whatever was happening at the time?
Yeah, thank you. In particular, my Reflections series paintings is I guess my first foray into a really formal version of my work. I can invite everybody just to Google my name. There's quite a bit about me on the internet that you can read about, including the Reflections paintings. The Reflections paintings deals with seas and oceans all over the world. I'm in that work, I'm dealing with climate awareness and climate change as far as sea level rise and water temperature rise, which heavily affects the climate. All of that shifts. It has dramatic effects. As I don't know much about deep sea mining, but I would assume it's the same. It's the same concept as far as making those shifts and creating climate change happening much on a much faster scale. But my painting, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think it was 2023. My painting was included in the climate assessment. So the 5th annual climate assessment at the U.S. Congress, they included my Reflections painting, Blue Currents, in the discussion about climate in the oceans and waterways category. So Blue Currents is just an ocean awareness piece that has graphs and charts blended into the overall format of a contemporary art piece. My work is designed to be beautiful to see, but there's underlying tensions and things happening for those that question or want to know more about the artwork. There's a discovery element in my work about climate. Addition to that is the artwork was included in the U.S. Geological Society's survey PDF, which you can also find online just by Googling that and my name. I think it comes right up in a PDF format. So it was included in that document as well.
And then, Dodd, can you tell us what the name of your piece is? Maybe I can look it really quickly and do a screen share for people to kind of have a visual of what your work looks like.
Yeah, you can look at the reflections paintings. I believe if you just Google my name and go to images, there's quite a bit that pop up online. The reflections paintings are the ones that they're obviously all more blue in the blue color palettes, but the blue currents, I don't think that one's I have not published on my own outside of the U.S. Geological Survey and inclusion in the Senate. So that I try to keep some of my work, so I'll back up real quick. COVID kind of changed the course for artists exhibiting. Of course, everything was closed. So I kind of reconditioned my work to be a bit more exclusive and kind of less accessible. Along the same idea, I wanted to, in my work, when you see my work in person, it's an entirely different experience than seeing it in a photograph. And that's also, that's on purpose as well. Back to the day where you had to see artwork by going to a gallery, and being communal and social, which are very important things for us as a society, to have some normal functions as a positive society. But yeah, my work is designed to be seen more in person than it is in images. But online, you can see one of the reflections works. Were you able to locate just with an online search?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if I can screen share it.
Yeah, there you
There we
go.
go. Thank you, Dodd.
Yeah, there's several of them. Yeah, actually, go. No, there's the one I did with the residency with you. Go to the really deep blue one next to my self portrait. Yeah. So that's actually 7:30 p.m. That's actually I do a lot of work based on time and how time affects color. And different times of day, the same color looks different. But this is a water temperature and sea level rise artwork. These are quite large and heavy technique and layering. There's about 70 or 80 layers of translucent and semi-transparent paints. I work with acrylics and paint additives and all kinds of things to build the surface. But you can see basic charts and graphs. I really like seeing charts and graphs and how things move and how we see things linear and how linear documents time and think things in that process are the backbone behind my constructions.
And Maria has made it. So Maria, thanks for being here. I hope all is going well on your side. I know that you also recently had a big event, so I'd love to hear from you what's currently going on in your world, and if there's anything you want to do to set the stage to talk about deep sea policy as well.
I would love to. Can you guys hear me? Awesome. I'm sorry for the delay. I just got out of a work call that ran late. But it's lovely to speak to all of you. My name is Maria. I am a law student in my final year. I also run a coalition that tries to fight deep sea mining. We're a coalition of law students across the US and Canada. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our work, what deep sea mining is, and why we're very concerned about this. Can I share my screen? Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hello. I wanted to talk about protecting the deep sea from this very extractive industry. I like to talk about it as the environmental disaster that hasn't happened yet. So for those of us that love the sea and want to protect the seabed and the many organisms that live there that science is still to this day trying to discover, this is a very important it's a very important fight. So what it is the process of removal of minerals from the seafloor. The little picture that you see here is polymetallic nodules. They are little rocks that have been forming over millions of years. If you open them up, you can see, you can sort of read, it's sort of like looking to the rings of a tree. You can see their formation. A lot of them have cobalt, they have manganese. They also, some of them to lesser extents, have nickel, zinc, and other rare earth elements. They are used for, or they can be used, these minerals, for a plethora of things, such as steel alloys, lithium-ion batteries, transformers, inductors, memory storage devices, but most importantly, armor plating, boat propellers, and turbine blades. So the Trump administration basically in their first weeks in office set out an executive order, which I am now blanking on the name of, but it was basically unleashing American energy. The critical mineral supply chain is today mainly owned by China, so it's a big geopolitical concern for the United States. So they thought that the way that we can counter this is by doing a very crazy thing, which is going to the seafloor and basically mining all of it. Which we are arguing is a horrible move to do. A lot of these minerals, as humanity, has been extracting them over the last 50 years. So instead of, investing in recycling, they are trying to just mine the seafloor. Crazy, but this is what it is. This is what it looks like. So you have one of these machines that goes all the way down to the seafloor. Let's see, it's like 6,000 meters deep. It's basically the equivalent of having 50 elephants on top of a technical device. So it's a very, very high pressure environment. They go all the way down there. They scoop up the minerals, the polymetallic nodules, take them up to this ship over here, and then all of the sediment that is picked up along with it, they release back into the water column. So there are just many environmental concerns, both of the fact that you are basically destroying everything that's on the seafloor, so all of the different organisms that grow on these polymetallic nodules, but you're also disturbing the water column because the sediment plumes are probably going to be huge. So this is what it looks like. Some of the environmental impacts, as I mentioned a little bit already, polymetallic nodules take millions of years to form. They also play a very vital role in the ecosystems that they're a part of. A lot of these microorganisms use them for, they grow on them, they hide under them, they use them for reproduction, but there's also tiny little deep sea coral that grow on them. Here's pictures of the many different creatures that are on them. Traditional seabed mining also, again, completely destroys the seafloor and unleashes just a lot of noise, light, pollution, suffocating dust storms. Because it's very loud, there's just a lot of concern for different organisms that use echolocation. They also can introduce heavy metals and toxins into the water column. They can smother deep sea organisms, disrupt biological processes such as feeding as reproduction. So I was saying, sound travels way faster in the sea. And there's been already many studies that show that sonar, for example, really messes with the ability of ecolocators to function normally. However, the full extent of their impact is unknown. Over the last couple of weeks, more studies are coming out as deep sea mining enters the wider global discourse. More people are studying on this, and basically the scientific consensus around it is that it's probably going to be very, very destructive. However, because deep sea mining hasn't been done at a commercial scale yet, the true environmental effects are still very much unknown. So 40 countries as of last week have called for a precautionary pause, and because they're just saying the environmental impacts are just way too unknown. I'll also say that a lot of these deep sea organisms are endemic. They've evolved to live in the very extreme environments that is the deep sea. Therefore, they have very specific they have very specific functions, then they're also very specific organisms. I think over the last 10 years, we've discovered thousands of new organisms that we didn't know before. About 90% of them are still unnamed. So that just goes to show how little we know about the deep sea ecosystem. I also will say that loss of this genetic discovery can can be a big loss for science and also a big loss for the pharmaceutical industry, since in the past they've used deep sea organisms for pharmaceutical discovery. They've sequenced a lot of their DNA, and they've implemented what their findings into different advances. So this could be a big loss for science as well. As I said, waste discharge can spread. It can pose a threat to ocean fish, which are crucial for international fisheries. I also will say that the ocean and the deep ocean is the world's largest carbon sink. So it could also impact the ocean's carbon cycle. It could impact phytoplankton, which, as we know, are central to ocean ecosystems. They provide 50 to 80% of the world's oxygen. The polymetallic nodule mining for commercial mining, they want to do it in an area of the ocean that is called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone. It is in the Pacific, and it is almost as big as Europe. So can you imagine just absolutely destroying an area almost as big as Europe? The sediment plumes that will be discharged will be immense. It's really hard for us to quantify the extent of what the potential environmental impacts can be because it's never been done commercially before. But as you can imagine, it's a very big concern for us. There's also, although this is more focused on the sea, but there are also financial concerns. It's very difficult to get such huge mining equipment so deep underwater. The upfront costs are enormous. I added this slide because when we speak about this, or when I try to speak about this and pitch the idea that deep sea mining is not a good thing, we often lead with the financial concerns that we have, since this world kind of runs on money. So we always try to start with saying that financially this just doesn't make any sense. Metals have never been extracted at this scale before from the seabed, and there's just many uncertainties around how much it would actually cost. So the mining companies that do want to mine the seafloor have given some numbers. However, these numbers seem to be estimates, and it's very likely because big ocean projects, around 60% of the time, they usually go over budget. At the same time, there is this idea that we are going to continue being reliant on these minerals, cobalt, manganese, useful for electric vehicle batteries. However, because this commercial extraction hasn't started yet, it would likely happen in the next 5 to 10 years. However, by that point, humanity might have already moved past this. So we no longer need cobalt for electric batteries because actually Tesla already came out with batteries that don't need cobalt. So it's just sort of an insane idea that we're going to destroy the deep sea. We are going to create this horrible environmental situation. We also could just be opening up ourselves for a lot of litigation from other Pacific Island nations that depend on migratory fisheries, which deep sea mining will very likely disturb, just to get all these minerals that then we don't even need. It's madness, in my opinion. Also, again, UNEP have said that there is no financing of deep sea mining because it's not consistent with the sustainable blue economy finance principles. Major insurers and reinsurers have denied putting deep sea mining in their underwriting portfolios. I guess this is more to show that the international financial community doesn't even see this as a good path moving forward, both for the concern that they have about the environmental impacts that it will have and how this could open them up to litigation, but also just this is not a good it's just not a good decision to invest into this industry. There's also a lot of legal and geopolitical concerns, and here I added one of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance partners who want to speak at the International Seabed Authority. Sustainable Ocean Alliance has been instrumental in speaking up for the deep sea and fighting against deep sea mining at the international stage. At the International Seabed Authority right now, there are no current rules and regulations surrounding what good deep sea mining looks like. The Clarion-Clipperton Zone is in international waters. So what this means is that all of the resources in international waters are the common heritage of humankind. It means that it belongs to all of humanity. Therefore, it raises up a very interesting ethical but also legal question, which is who deserves to profit off of making money off of the deep sea? And also, if it leads to an environmental catastrophe, who is left with the responsibility? Who is left with the financial responsibility to foot the bill? If it affects migratory fisheries that Pacific Island nations depend on, should pay them for their loss. And right now, mining the international seabed unilaterally is in violation of international law. The US, the United States, is a signatory to the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, but they haven't ratified this. What it means in international law is that once you're a signatory to one of these conventions, you are basically agreeing that you're not going to act against it. So the US has basically signed on to UNCLOS, and it has said we are in agreement that we are not going to act against it. Therefore, mining the deep sea would go against the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, and it would be in violation of international law that the US itself has agreed to. So it again, madness. That being said, a little country called Nauru, which is a Pacific Island nation, a couple years ago, was approached by the metals company, and they put in an application to the International Seabed Authority asking them to set rules and regulations so they can put in an application to potentially mine in international waters. So now the International Seabed Authority has they have a dilemma because on the one side they have this mandate by UNCLOS to be as environmentally friendly as possible to protect the deep sea. But then they also have a mandate because the United Nations, the International Seabed Authority is a subsection of the United Nations that specifically looks to the deep sea. They have a mandate also to listen to what countries are saying. And if one country wants to mine, they need to think about how to do that in the best possible way. So it's sort of an impossible task, because how do you quantify resources that belong to all of humanity? How can you possibly allow one country to mine the deep sea and make money off of it, but still at the same time make sure that all other countries in the world are properly compensated for it? It's almost an impossible question, but that is something that the International Seabed Authority is currently working on now. At the same time, within each country's EEZ, which is their exclusive economic zone, countries do have the right to exploit their resources in the EEZ in the way that they see fit. So if a small company or a country wants to mine their national waters, they are free to do so. However, this can also lead to legal battles, and we saw this with Mexico, who allowed phosphate mining off of their EEZ with a US-based company. And then the Mexican government changed, and they decided that they no longer wanted to mine their seabed. However, this mining company, US-based mining company, sued them because they said, oh, well, you already agreed that we were going to do this. We started investing money in preparation to mine the seabed, and now you said no. So they took them to court, and they actually won. So it can be a big issue for a country to even start thinking about seabed mining and then realize that, okay, this is actually, now that we've thought about it better, we don't want to do this anymore, which is what happened with Mexico. You're still opening up yourself to potential liability. At the same time, the idea of strict liability, which I talked a little bit about before, if a country, let's say Mexico, for example, allowed mining in their seabed, and because of the enormity of the destruction, it also affects fisheries, or it affects other countries around it. These other countries can also bring Mexico to court because there was transboundary harm, right? You mining in your own EEZ affected me. So because you're in the, I got hurt because of an action that you did, now I can bring you to court and I'm likely to win. So this also, it just, because the sea is completely interconnected, just because a country is doing something in their EEZ doesn't mean that other countries aren't going to be affected. So it's just it's a big risk. And it's a big risk, and it's something that a lot of these mining companies don't really, or from what we've seen, it's something that's risky. It's something that's environmentally destructive, and it's an issue that's going to keep coming up. At the same time, I didn't add this on this, but can you guys see this? So this You see this, the Federal Register?
Yes.
Okay. So this is something that just came out last week. And the Trump administration not only wants to mine in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, they've also opened up commercial leasing of the waters of American Samoa and on the outer continental shelf of the Northern Mariana Islands. And we just found this one out specifically last week. So basically, they want to do ferromanganese nodule mining off of the Mariana Islands, so near the Marianas Trench. This is different from polymetallic nodule mining, which I was talking about before. In this case, they want to mine hydrothermal vents. So it's just completely clear cutting, destroying the hydrothermal vents and the plethora of species that thrive on top of hydrothermal vents. And they're doing this for coppers and for golds. So it's not even for cobalt or manganese, which is something that is more needed, and we have less of a hand in the critical mineral supply chain. This is even crazier. Not even the last two, right? Polymetallic nodules off of American Samoa and in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone were things that the US government did almost as a response of mining companies approaching them and lobbying the government saying, we want to do this. The federal government just decided to do on their own. So I encourage all of you to please submit a comment. We have an open comment period that ends in 22 days. I'll put this in the chat in a little bit, but you can come here, you can submit a public comment and just ask the federal government to please not spend taxpayer money on this fool's errand. As I said, it would completely destroy the seafloor. It would completely destroy hydrothermal vents, which are very necessary and just very scientifically they're scientific hotspots, right? We're still learning so much from them. It would also destroy all of the deep sea corals that grow on the hydrothermal vents. It would destroy all organisms that live on the hydrothermal vents. And it is off the island of Guam. I would also encourage you to ask the federal government to take into account what the people of Guam want specifically. So this is for the Northern Marianas. I will also say the other comment periods have passed, but my coalition alongside Sustainable Ocean Alliance, Futures Well, and the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, which are other organizations that are trying to fight deep sea mining. In the past, we have fought other moves, let's say, by the federal government to try to fast track deep sea mining. Last month, they opened a comment period, and basically they were saying that when you are petitioning when you're petitioning or you have a permit or you're asking for a permit to do a big ocean project, there's usually two steps that you have to do. The first step, both steps have their own independent environmental impact assessment. So the first one would be just to explore and then get a better idea of what is needed. And the second one would be for actual commercial extraction. So what the federal government was trying to do is they were trying to combine both of them. So there would only be one environmental impact assessment, both for exploration and extraction. So what we were trying to say is absolutely not. You need to have you need to make sure that two steps are separate. You need to have an environmental impact assessment when you're just looking to explore, and then also a different environmental impact assessment when you're trying to extract these minerals from the seafloor. The environmental impacts for both of them are going to be different. I would think that's common sense, but clearly they didn't. So that is something that our coalition has done in the past. And yeah, and right now we are preparing a response for this one on the Northern Marianas Island. And so yeah, let me make sure I send this. I will say it would be super helpful if for anyone here that's a US citizen to comment, because they are supposed to read through all of the comments. Something that would be very impactful is to say that you don't want taxpayer money to be spent on this. This is a very, very costly commercial endeavor. Like I said, because there is such a huge amount of pressure in the deep sea, you have to create really expensive machines. You need a lot of ships, you need a lot of fuel, you need a lot of workers. The expected amount that is supposed to be invested into this is in the billions of dollars. And like I said, the expected return is higher. I think it's about an $8 billion investment for a $13 billion return. However, that is if everything goes according to plan, which very much doesn't when you're dealing with commercial exploitation in the deep sea because of the high amount of pressure and also just because it's such a hard environment. So you can talk about not wanting your money, your the taxes that you're paying to be spent on this. You can talk about the need for deep scientific exploration and discovery before deep sea mining goes forward. You can talk about, protecting deep sea species and the importance of phytoplankton in the deep sea for a healthy ocean. Those are all things that you can write if you would want to submit a public comment, which I encourage everyone to please do. So yes, definitely please help us fight this. Thank you for the Sustainable Ocean Alliance for all the work that they're doing. If you're interested, if any of you guys are legal minded at all, you can get connected with me and join our coalition of law students against deep sea mining. And if you want to just continue learning about this, you can look at the Sustainable Ocean Alliance website or the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, which is a coalition of a lot of organizations that are trying to fight the deep sea. So that is it for me.
Thank you so much, Maria. Somebody in the chat was asking if there can be a link shared for that. Thank you. And then is there an international, like, for example, just because this one's specifically for the US, is there an international forum for other countries if they also want to pitch in that you know of?
So if for those of you guys who aren't in the US, I would encourage you to look at the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition. They are connected with many different countries around the world. It's a global organization, and they are the ones that are pushing initiatives in different countries to make sure that different countries around the world also speak up against deep sea mining. As of a couple weeks ago, there are 40 countries that have already called for a precautionary pause on deep sea mining until we know more. Let me see if I can send here their website so you guys can see. Yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free.
I just wanted to let you all know that I put a link to Sustainable Ocean Alliance's Deep Sea Academy, where you can go much more into the nitty gritty on what's going on with deep sea mining if you're looking to learn more. But back to questions.
Yeah, feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself if you have a question for both Maria and Dodd.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Dodd, this question is for you. Thank you. It was really interesting listening to you speak about your work and how you make these complex and very abstract and often difficult topics to do with the ocean and the sea look beautiful. Do you use computational elements to inform your paintings or your visual work, or do you more look at the information, maybe not in number form or numerical format to inform your work, or does it use real data and numbers to inform the patterns that you create?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for allowing me to elaborate a bit more. So I've always been attracted to just charts and graphs. I think they're quite beautiful. And the fact that they're telling information, I think is really interesting concept as well. When I first started stumbling along the path of creating two-dimensional painting work, I just started to incorporate a linear concept. And from that did grow what you said, factual information. As we see facts being distorted in so many things these days, and blanket conversations or blanket answers to questions that are so complex. You know, when you look at data, the recording of data, especially sea level rise. So sea level rise has been recorded, actually on a scale of time, not very long. We've only been recording sea level rise and sea temperatures for a short period of time. But the data is pretty truthful. You can really see it if you look at the data. So I am now really keeping close control of the factual scale in the work as well. So yes, so originally I was just intoxicated with the beauty of color arrangements and colors, how we use color scales and how that physically registers to us, just in a visual context. But now my work has become really closely knitted to that data, the mathematics and the scale of it. So my works are quite large. I do use Fibonacci numbers to construct my work. So that's actually been in my works for a while, even my sculptural work. So I do keep pretty heavy mathematical background in the construction of my work. I think before that was more related to the fact that it perfect math actually looks nice to us. That's why the pyramids are an example of perfect math. So when you see a pyramid, that shape just seems to be really, really pleasing to the eye. Whereas you look at some of the mistake pyramids, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, the pyramids that were too steep, and they're called step pyramids because they realized when they were building them that they would be too steep, so they actually changed the math to make them climb up a bit more. That's before they figured out this numbering system. But in my work, I really experiment with how color affects you, how it affects your eyes as far as uncomfortable and comfort, and how math affects you in the same way. But yes, my more current work is taking what you just said into account really considerably, and actually making contemporary artwork. I wouldn't say my work is so abstract. It's kind of in a new area because it's factual, and there is a patterning to my work and a color scale, a mastery of color that I have really been working on. So it's a little bit more than that, but it has a factual background. It actually has fact in it. Myself as a contemporary artist, I try not to flaunt in the face of somebody the idea of "don't you get it" type of a thing. I don't like that. I think art should be for everybody, from children to people who are scientists. Everybody sees something different. In my work, I try to incorporate some pretty heavy topics, but visually from your very first digesting of my work, it seems comfortable and fun. But there's a lot more as you want to enter the piece and walk into it, which to me is what you're supposed to do with art, and especially contemporary art. It's supposed to challenge you somewhat and ask you some questions to step into it. So that's what I am doing with my work, and that background of mixing science, fact, and graphs in an environmental context into contemporary arrangements.
Thank you. Yeah, I also work with data and computer science, and I make moving sculptures based on the data. But sometimes it can be really not depressing, but a bit like doom and gloom, trying to make these moving sculptures that are showing something really sad.
That's that.
And I use motors as well to make them move. So it's like, how can you make them hopeful to invite people into the conversation, but
Right.
staying factual?
Yeah, and I think that's a really key element, because if you're too challenging and you're too mocking and too, I guess, depressing, you lose people rather quickly, I would assume. And that's what I try not to do with my work. I try to make it really approachable, yet there's something underlying which is obvious. And I have people that own my paintings that don't see some things until quite a long time later, and they actually notice something else, and they'll call me and they say, I noticed something going on here. Is something resonating in here that I see like this? And it is. So there's a depth to the work. And I think that's, as an artist, that's where you really start to be in control of your media, how you can control how somebody sees it and not try to place somebody in an uncomfortable position because, like I said, they don't get it, or you're trying to be, of course, if you're really absorbed into that concept, a lot more than what the person is just stepping in front of your construction or your installation knows, but you want them to enjoy the journey as well. I think it lasts longer, and they may get the concept much deeper.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Or it may change somebody's opinion, right? I know sometimes art can be used for bringing topics to the general public, and I know you use them for sometimes, or your art has been used on policy platforms, Dodd, to try to change people's mind, right? I think art is one of the ways that sometimes that art and science and policy can work towards a goal.
That's right. The installation that I made in Croatia, that was, and again, it's all these factors when you go from a painting, which is something you're completely in control of. It's happening in your studio, and you can produce it without much interaction. But rather, when you do a public installation sculpture, so I produced a sculpture in Croatia called glass again, and it's a play on words for seagrass, something that Maria was speaking about, which I have a really heavy knowledge of now since doing the project. It's River Bajul in Croatia that feeds into the 3 seas regions of the Mediterranean. There's 2 types of seagrass that exist in the ocean, one that recovers quite quickly and one that takes more than 20 years to recover if it gets damaged. And again, it's a very heavy atmospheric element that's really key in oxygen production and all kinds of cool stuff like that. But when I did the construction piece in Croatia, you have to be very careful about writing a very comfortable line between something that is pleasing and interesting for people, yet it is dealing with a heavy topic of seagrass protection, ocean awareness, sea protection, all kinds of different concepts kind of rolled up into one idea. And I think as an artist, that's what you strive for. I think that's when you can reach your pinnacle, is if you can dance quite carefully and get the message across.
We had a question in the chat that said, Dodd, might you guide us through the process of reading the data in one of your pieces? I'm imagining what the vertical and horizontal axes represent, but would love to hear your descriptions of the foundational content.
Yeah, so I work in linear time. It's interesting because computers don't work in linear time. But as an artist, I'm speaking myself as an artist, but I'm sure everybody kind of develops in linear time because you learn more as you grow. And so that's my work is divided in linear time, but it's also divided by time of day. So a lot of people, when you confront my work, it can be challenging. I've witnessed that where people get switched off right away because it could possibly be very challenging to look at. And then people that really enjoy it, like they are really fascinated with the depth of what's happening. Again, my work in person is an entirely different function because I mix powdered glass and all kinds of different things with the surfaces. Sorry. Very dry. Hold on 1 minute. Okay. I have a cold that I'm suffering through. You'll have to take over for a moment.
I'll drop it in the chat in the meantime.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been struggling through a cold. But the horizontal sections are time of day and how color is affected by light. So I'm very conscious of color and color arrangements. So that's actually what I'm chasing in the horizontal arrangements. The, the vertical parts are graphs and charts, plus, minus, color scale, all kinds of things that happen in environmental graphs and charts. Those are the things that I'm digesting on a broad scale. So I'm not looking at one chart, but rather I'm looking at hundreds of charts. I love to pour through environmental data, not necessarily the written part, but the visual expression parts, and how they get classified as factual and what we're used to, either a scale, a vertical scale or a horizontal scale, which you can record data in both of those elements and then weave your way through the scale. That's basically what I'm approaching in my work and in the construction of it.
Thank you so much, Dodd. If anybody else has questions for Dodd or Maria, please feel free to chime in. I know policy can be a daunting subject, just like, you know, learning about the deep sea and deep sea mining, but that's what we're here for, right? To make sure that we all feel comfortable asking the questions that we've been meaning to ask. And if we have questions that show up later, that's okay. There will be the recording and links of where you can find Dodd and Maria as well, and the links of all the resources that they have shared with us so far. Okay, I have a last question for Maria before we wrap things up. So, from coming from this deep sea like policy, a lot of legislation and things that are happening, do you think that, for example, using Dodd's painting as examples, there's a place for art to maybe change people's minds when it comes to policy when it's a very heavy subject? Or is it more of an introduction to the subject and then like people really have to kind of pay attention? Like, what would be the best way to change people's minds using, you know, either art as a vehicle or maybe as a little hook? Or how can we get people to be more interested in this and pay attention?
Oh my God, absolutely. That's such an incredible question. And I'm so glad you asked it because it is something that those of us who try to do environmental law protection, that's something that we speak about a lot. Whenever you are looking at protections, environmental protections in the law, you often see that animals that are cuter or that we as humans connect with more usually get more protections. I mean, the US has the Marine Mammal Protection Act specifically. Although marine mammals are very important for the environment, there are a plethora of other marine animals that are also important, but it's the mammals, specifically the whales, the dolphins that we find cuter, that we've seen in movies, that we connect with more. It's the ones that get the most legal protection because it's the ones that people we humans connect with more. So when I've been talking about deep sea protection in my own personal Instagram, I always try to put or put pictures of deep sea creatures, try to do it in a way that's artistic, try to show how beautiful they are, how the deep ocean is basically like another planet. And I think that when people can connect, and art is such a beautiful medium through which we can connect ourselves to something that's a part of our planet, which is the deep sea. I do fun things on my social media when I'm trying to get people to post a public comment or politically activate around something. I one time I did a if you submit a public comment and show me proof, I'm going to tell you what your spirit deep sea animal is based on what I know about you. So I always try to do fun activities that that get people to care. And I feel like showing the beauty of the deep ocean and showing that there is life down there, and the life down there, though it looks very funky and weird, is just as valuable as a dolphin or a whale, and as they all just as deserving of protection and respect as these other more familiar animals, you know. So I think that art is such a valuable medium through which we can get people to learn about the deep sea, to care, because usually policy follows what people care about. So if people learn about this, and they care about this, I definitely think that policy will follow. So for sure, art is, and I'm not that artistic, but I do try to do artistic things to get people to care about the deep sea. For sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you can present a topic in a way that's interesting and colorful, without being accusatory, I think that eventually when it starts to shut people down, as long as it's like a constructive conversation with options. It's like when you tell somebody, oh, you should recycle, but maybe they don't know how. You can recycle by doing A, B, and C, and then somebody has an idea where they don't feel uncomfortable. I think when we as people, when someone gets challenged rather, and being told something, then most people react in a protective way, recoil. But if you can bring up an idea, or a problem, you classify it as a problem, but I don't like to use that word because then it already starts to create conflict. But if you could just bring up the topic and then present it in a way that gives somebody an actionable movement, then it becomes much more powerful. A lot of people, the deep sea doesn't mean much to people because it's so new to us. We haven't seen so much, although there's been documentaries like you mentioned before. There's technology now which allows us to be much deeper and to see things in the ocean at a deeper cause or a deeper effect. And then understanding what that means to you. A lot of people think, well, the deep ocean is pretty far away from me, but it does have residual effects that we see on a scale that's happening much quicker now. Climate change is happening, much faster, or much more progressed, and it's because of all these actions that we've made. There's something here in California, which I'm in Southern California. DDT was dropped in the ocean off of the coast of I think it's out off Long Beach, out in the middle of the ocean someplace, and the barrels have been sitting on the bottom of the ocean for quite a long time. Again, back in a time where you didn't really know what to do, but you can Google it. It's come up again recently in the news that the barrels have deteriorated, and now it's a problem because you can't move the barrel, because as soon as you touch the barrel, it's going to fall apart. And now you've really released the content, the contained element inside. But if you can, through art is a visual attraction, and I have really spent a lot of time wrestling with being able to present something visually that's fun, and fun to look at, and interesting to see, and somewhat challenging, but in a way that kind of opens the door and doesn't make people feel threatened. I think I did a conversation recently where we talked about, I don't believe in dark art, or not a fan of dark art or anything that's ugly or presents a lot of sadness, because you can find that quite easily just by walking around your neighborhood. But if you can present a concept that is something that really needs to be dealt with in a way that is thought-provoking, but also has some answers or some doors, I think you can. It's much more impactful process.
Thank you so much. Out of respect for everybody's time, if you got some questions, you can always send them our way, and we'll make sure to forward them to Dodd and Maria. Thank you so much for both of our speakers, and for Mr. John Letts. If anybody else has resources, and there will be a link video posted for the recording if you missed part of it, or you want to watch it again, or you want to learn more about where to find Maria and Dodd, we'll have that up in a couple of days. And other than that, thank you so much for joining us today, you guys.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. A quick opinion about Dodd's works. No, see, yeah, by glancing at your website, I thought your pieces were related to that kind of layers of sediments or layers of the Earth's ground. The, I realized that after listening to your explaining about your pieces, see, the axes are blah blah, and the time and the spans, and that whatchamacallit, that made me understand more deeper than your pieces. And the concept was excellent, I thought. Thank you for sharing that. And Maria, thank you for sharing and information about Devotion Academy. I yeah, I created an account on it already. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a
Thank you.
lot. See you later.
Bye, guys.